The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Live from the New Scientist Labs, Janine Young, newscientist.com.
Yes, Janine Young is with us in Melbourne City. Hello to you, Janine.
Good morning, Wammo.
A couple of fantastic stories. I'm really excited about these ones. The first, shall we go with the best one first? Oh, no, I reckon they're both good.
Let's start with the best. You want to start with the best last or first?
No, let's start with it first. I think, or that's the same thing, isn't it? Anyway, you've got me confused. A seed store, a vital seed store, could be set for destruction.
The word destruction will always make anything sound more exciting. This is actually not, end of the world type story, but it could actually quite seriously have an impact on how things travel after climate change. There's a seed store in a place called Pavlovsk. It's outside St. Petersburg. Now you've got me not being able to even speak. It's outside St. Petersburg in Russia.
Yeah.
And it has a really important store of about 4,000 varieties of fruits. So everything from cherries to raspberries to gooseberries to strawberries. They've got, I'm just reading this to make sure I've got it right, 1,000 types of strawberries from 40 countries. Now, most people would think, well, what's the big deal? That doesn't mean anything. Seed banks are actually incredibly important because when you have a loss of genetic diversity, as you do with a lot of commercial crops at the moment, you don't have any kind of way to generate diversity if you don't have these original old seed stocks to go to. And the problem is that the land that this seed stock is on, the seed bank, is currently being put up for housing, and very likely it's going to be destroyed because it can't be exported. Because of quarantine regulations, it can't be exported quickly. They won't survive freezing. A lot of these seeds are very, very fragile. You know that you don't really freeze strawberry seeds. It's not really the way it works.
Yeah.
So they're looking at it at the moment, just kind of going, well, if an appeal that's being held on the 28th, and we can report back on this one next week and let people know what happens. If an appeal on the 28th in the courts isn't successful, and no one is confident that it will be, it means that this seed store is just going to be destroyed. And researchers across the world are trying to mobilise now to be able to find other places that these seeds can go to. Because they need to be planted out. They can't survive freezing, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, here's a solution. Why can't they just shift it down the road? Away from housing development. Because I gather that a whole chunk of that area has been sold off and it's going to be given over to housing. It's not apparently this is not a simple solution for all the other background reasons. It's not as simple as just moving it down the road. Russia is more concerned about housing its people than it is about its crop genetic diversity, unfortunately. Yeah. Have you heard about that big seed store? Is it close to the Arctic, and it's underground and it's all frozen?
Svalbard, yes. It's on the island of Spitsbergen in Norway. It's about 1,300 kilometres away from the Arctic Circle, so it's, yes, I know about this one. It's really cool. I love it. It's a seed bank that's actually a seed bank for seed banks. There are hundreds of seed banks across the world. New Zealand even has a couple. You have one for endangered species because, things change, climate and human impacts on the environment and the like.
Yeah.
There are seed banks all over the world. So the whole idea of Svalbard is to be able to put them into cold storage, and that way they can survive for, however many 100 years. And seeds can still survive even under adverse conditions. There was a whole bunch of seeds discovered about 4 or 5 years ago for an explorer who'd gone around the world picking up seeds. He was fascinated with them. And 150 years later, they tried to grow them, and some of the seeds grew. Wow. Astonishing. Seeds are really resilient. You can get me going for hours on this. I love it. Seeds are really resilient, and if you keep them under the right conditions, you are able to grow them again with a lot more ease than if you put them, in an archive like these other seeds were done, and you actually don't look after them properly. But if you do, it means that you have a source of genetic diversity to be able to go back to if and when commercial crops fail or climate change shifts where you can start growing things. And that's part of the reason why this seed bank in Russia is so important, because cropping is likely to move further north due to climate change and the way that agriculture is changing. So if you don't have, say, frost-resistant strawberries, and believe me, they exist, they really do, they just don't in countries that we live in. If you don't have those to be able to draw on, you can't just generate genetic diversity unless you start tinkering with it and you wind up doing genetic modification. But why would you do that when you have something that's been naturally put together over 1,000 years and you already know works?
I tell you what, the strawberries at my house are certainly trying to be frost resistant. I've got some strawberries growing at the moment, like actual berries. Weird.
Look, we don't have a garden. You may see that we're 7 stories up, and we're desperate to get a place where I can grow things like raspberries and strawberries, and the growing things for me is just the single most wonderful thing in the world. So I'd love to have frost-resistant strawberries, but I don't have anywhere I could grow them.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, from a super cool story to a story that's a little bit scary, really. How about a future where the sky is full of planes, but the ground is full of pilots? Hang on.
Yes, this story disturbs me, I must say. There's a bunch of researchers right across the world. There's the Federal Aviation Authority in the United States. Sorry, administration. Everything is an administration in the United States. Is working with Boeing and the National Air Guard to try and work out if they can make things like cargo planes, for example, pilotless. I'm just going to rest on that for a second because I find that quite a disturbing prospect.
I don't like
Now, to be able to do... There are drones running around at the moment anyway. They do surveillance, they do crop monitoring, they do search and rescue. A lot of unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, we hear about them quite frequently, and they're out there. They're not causing any problems because they have segregated airspace. It's definitely not where passenger aircraft fly. It's not causing any problems aside from the fact there's not enough airspace for passenger and other commercial traffic to be able to work in the same space or next to these UAVs. So the natural leap for people is to say, well, let's see if we can actually make them safe enough that they can fly in commercial space. Again, not doing too badly, not too concerned with that one.
Yeah.
But certainly for cargo flights, pilots cost a fortune. And you can see that there's a natural cost pressure to want to remove the pilots altogether because, well, they cost a lot and cargo planes don't carry anything important like people. So why do you need a pilot? That's the sort of rationale behind it. Again, I can see how that might work, but as soon as you start involving passengers, I get nervous. I'm a pilot's daughter. I think that's not a natural way to have things up in the air. But you can see why they want it to happen.
Yeah.
And in principle, having pilotless aircraft does mean that you can potentially make things more efficient. It will still have to have a pilot. They'll just be 100 kilometres away on the ground.
But that's relying on the mechanics. I mean, we know that there are definite human faults when it comes to air crashes, but there are a lot of mechanical issues as well that pilots can overcome if they're inside the plane itself.
Human ingenuity can be really important for avoiding really tricky situations that something like an unmanned aerial vehicle has never seen before. They're testing, excuse me, I'm coming down with a cold, so you'll have to excuse my voice. They're testing a lot of avoidance mechanisms. They're using things like infrared sensors and microwave sensors to be able to see through clouds and the like. So they're getting a lot better at being able to see what else is out there. The issue would arise when something comes up that it didn't track or it hasn't seen before. So that's where I think a lot of people would start to get nervous. Equally, if you had a passenger jet that was offering $50 fares to Los Angeles, for example, but the kicker was that there was no pilot, there'd be any number of people that would go, it's cheap. Okay. It's a balance. And I think people's risk assessments personally alter. So there will be some people that go for it, but trust me, it's not happening just yet.
No. Good. Well, Janine Young, thanks so much for the cool and for the scary from New Scientist.
Well, I don't mean to scare anybody because it's not actually happened yet, but I'm happy to be here to tell you about it.
All right, well, those stories will be in the New Scientist magazine next week, and Janine will be back next week once again as well.